James Clavell's historical fiction Shogun, a navigator named John Blackthorn guides a small armada to Japan. This makes Blackthorn and his starving crew the first Englishmen to set foot on the islands. And of his crew, Blackthorn is the only man willing to put aside his medieval prejudices. Despite being urinated on by a feudal lord, being beaten, being threatened, and having listened to one of his crewmates being boiled alive, he still meets the locals on their level. He learns to speak Japanese, dress like the Japanese, and embrace Japanese philosophy. For his efforts, he rises through the ranks of their society, eventually becoming nobility himself, as well as the personal advisor to the Shogun. After the book was published in 1975, readers found Blackthorn's journey of cultural immersion and social calibration so compelling, it sold 6 million copies and single-handedly increased tourism to Japan. Fans of the book wanted to live it. Shogun became eat, pray, love for middle-aged history buffs, which is why it's also been remade over and over into TV series, movies, and fictional spin-offs. But here's the kicker. Shogun was a real story. Clavell's based his fictional universe very closely on the rise of Tokugawa Ieyasu as the supreme warlord of Japan. John Blackthorn was real too. His name was William Adams. And just like his fictional counterpart, Adams also became an advisor to the Shogun. However, if there's one thing the author toned down from the reality, it was the incredible hardship Adams had to endure before he was ready to tune his social antenna to a totally different culture and totally different class. For one thing, William Adams started to search for Japan with his brother, a brother who, after failing to communicate with indigenous tribes of Chile, attempted to steal supplies for the ship. The raid was a failure, however, and Adams' brother was killed. Which means by the time he arrived in Japan, the real Blackthorn had already learned the hardest lesson in calibrating one's social antenna. If you aren't willing to listen, then brace yourself for backlash. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Lametz, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no duh on the internet.
As a general rule, we don't like new people. Early humans started out in close-knit tribes, forming our own languages and keeping away from outsiders. The idea of leaving one's tribe and attempting to integrate into another group without getting clubbed to death just seems wrong. Fast forward to philosophers like Socrates, who made it his mission to be a gadfly to everyone in the city, speaking with every learned person he could find. Or political leaders who dined with someone new every evening, thus maximizing their world perspective. Today we're talking about social calibration, the ability to experience the vast tapestry of humankind and human thought, and adjust our behavior and our attitude accordingly. Like a pair of social cablemen, we have 3 myths to cover with you, which should help us calibrate our antenna. Myth 1. Our great-grandfathers were all set in their ways, salt-of-the-earth farmers. They didn't have to calibrate with anyone or any group. So why should we? Myth 2. Calibration sounds like a fancy word for being social, and I'm already good at that. What more is there to know? Myth 3. If calibration is so darn great and it gets you a ton of opportunities, why would you ever stop? What could be the danger of being too loved in a large social group? We're going to get to our myths, but first I want to tell Joe about how the idea of this episode was born.
I actually don't know the answer to this. How did you texted me and you said, can we do an episode about social calibration? I don't know how that came about. Like, were you at like a dinner party or something? You got slapped or how did that start?
Okay. Years ago, I was a vice president for HSBC. At the time, it was the biggest bank in the world. I was the only person at my pay rate, at my position, who hadn't gone to college. I had sold a bunch of cars and then got into auto finance and got this job just based on life experience and work experience. And I was in an airport in Texas, and the CEO of not of HSBC but of our department of auto finance was there with me, and I was sitting with a bunch of the big bosses. And he used to play football before he was a big shot businessman. He played in the NFL. He played for the 49ers. And I asked him very curiously, because being a football fan and he was the big boss, I was just kind of starstruck that I was sitting next to him, right? How they traveled. And he said they chartered flights, and I didn't know what that meant. And I
Mm.
told him, and he embarrassed me in front of everybody and said, how could you not know what a charter flight is? And really, really humiliated me in front of people I looked up to. And it bothered me for years, and I thought, well, that was really rude of him to do that. He could have just explained it to me like I was a kid, like I was a third grader, because I was, I didn't know. I did. And how would I know?
Right.
And so for this article, though, or for this episode, in my neighborhood, I live right next to Intel. So my neighbors are all engineers, and they're all really PhDs. They're all really brilliant. But they have a very hard time communicating with people who aren't PhDs. They have a hard time communicating with people of a lower social class, and they have a problem communicating with people at work. It's a struggle for them. And I thought, well, is there a way that we could teach these super smart people who know how to learn a calibration tool so they can communicate from people who change the oil to their car to the people who run their companies?
Okay. There's a lot of really great information there. First off, you were a VP of HSBC.
I know. Shockingly. It was a long time ago. It was the best job ever. I just barely got in. It was like this
Okay.
affirmative action. There was a landslide of, and I don't name drop that enough. I have never told you that.
No, that I'm impressed. Like, I thought I knew everything about you. Um, okay, so and I think you're dead on. I love the idea of an episode. That's the most sort of like realistic self help you can get. How do you walk into a room of people who are of a different social class, whether it's up or down, it doesn't matter. How do you walk into a room of people who are in a different class and even like a different sort of culture than you, work culture, global culture, economic culture, whatever. The idea is that some of us are slow calibrators, some of us are fast. We all do it. It will happen over time. Just you can't get away from it. Um, and when you're younger, it's easier. So like a
Do you
young,
think, though, Joe? Do you think it,
yeah,
and I want to go back to the young thing, but do you think that at first we try to just really close off, you know, put up, put our guard up, and just try to hook on to people who have similar interests
yeah.
for comfort and
I think you're right. I think the instinct for social calibration, if we can put it into context of your pool of engineers from work or who are working at Intel or something, if they go to a party or a group setting, their instinct is for comfort. I know this from experience as an introvert. You find somebody who has seen the same TV shows as you. Like I would look
Mhm.
for somebody who has seen the show Shogun and be like, "Oh, did you see that latest episode? That was
Right.
awesome."
Who loves
Uh,
sports, who's a sports fan like you, someone you could just buddy up to comfort.
right. See somebody wearing anything on their shirt that indicates that we have a shared interest, and then go talk to them. Um, but that's also a weakness in social calibration is we want to learn how to communicate on somebody else's level, both in their like their group culture and dynamic, but also on their intellectual level, and that is tough. That is a very tall order. If I took you, Todd, and put you to work at Intel or at another major computer company, if I moved you down here to like to work with Tesla or Elon Musk, and I dropped you in the middle of like a cafeteria there and locked it. Like you can't leave. Like you're chained in that environment and you physically cannot go home. There's no comfort. There's nobody around that like knows sports. You can't go home and talk to like your sports buddies or go to the bar down the street and talk sports with them. Or whatever. For me, it would be like, fiction. I can't talk to anybody about sci-fi. You will eventually calibrate to them, like you over time, without any sort of escape mechanism. You'll calibrate. You just will, because we're built to from the cave. Like we're built to, in extreme circumstances, acclimate to the environment around us socially. And if that means that, the rest of my tribe is murdered by Tyrannosaurus rexes. I know dinosaurs didn't exist at the same time as humans, but roll with me. But if the rest of my tribe is murdered, I go to a new tribe and I slowly step into that hot tub and I get used to it and I start being able to communicate on their level. That's instinct. How do we do that on purpose? Because doing it on purpose means better jobs quicker, more opportunities. Like you said, you get into positions that you otherwise wouldn't get. I remember going to a job interview that was way out of my league, and I, I I was it was a group sort of pre-interview where they were just talking to us as an interview pool, and the person who was running it was extraordinarily friendly and nice. But while they were asking us about these questions of like, have you ever met somebody that you're very disagreeable with, or who in your life has challenged you the most? And we had somebody at the table go off about their stepfather, just absolutely ranting and railing about them. And the person at the head of the table very coolly said, after they were using profanity, like they weren't going to get the job, like they disqualified themselves immediately, and they were ranting, and the person at the table said, "Tell us how you really feel." And it was such a upper
Levity.
class, cool
Yeah.
headed joke, and I was like, that's the yeah, that's a level of class that I don't have right now. And so
We
I yeah.
You started to talk about earlier about children are good at this, and I'm thinking this is to explain that. Like, is this because we learned this stuff in kindergarten, kind of thing?
Yeah, it's kind of the same mechanism as language. Part of it is language. It's if you have somebody who is young. I mean, like they talk about indoctrinating children or educating them, or what was it? The Jesuits said, you show me a child at age 5 or 6. Give me a child at this age, and I will show you the man he will become. Is the old quote. It just means that the younger a kid is, the more sort of blank slate they have. They will learn very quickly what is acceptable to say and what isn't. They will learn very quickly, um, you know, uh, uh, how much deference you show authority. If you're joining the
Yeah.
Japanese feudal peerage, you have to bow. Like you have to put your eyes down. Like you have to know who to show deference to, and you have to know who to stand up to. Like who you have to have an observation of classism, which we don't have here. Like that's not a modern American thing. So I think the reason why this show and the book resonated so hard with Americans is because we're very individualistic, and we're reading about a culture that's like, it sounds brutal, and people are forced to commit suicide, and it's feudal, and there's all these like crazy rules about what not to do. So
Well,
this is
with
yeah.
children too, they haven't tested those boundaries and seen what they can get away with, and seen how they can bully. Right? They're not there yet. You
Right.
get a little older when you get a job title and some experience. You start to think, you can use your whatever you do to kind of push the buttons and
Well, that's I think you said it, the job, that I think that's going to be the first thing that people take away as a benefit if they learn social calibration, is instead of subconsciously over time adjusting to the social waters around you just very slowly by temperature, if you jump in and figure it out quick, you get a lot more opportunities, and you also get a lot more relationships out of it, like interpersonal. uh, um, if you can adjust quickly, people will like you more, they'll want to tell you more, they'll want to hang out with you more, and it'll be easier for you to like keep treading water with certain relationships until you figure it out. Like there are relationships I've been in where, like a boss or a mentor, where they are way out of my league intellectually or socially, and I have to keep up with them until I kind of get the rhythm. And hopefully, like if we talk about calibration enough, it'll kind of people will see a way to do that. Um,
Well, I want to. I do want to talk about what it looks like when someone won't calibrate or doesn't think they have to.
yes,
It
please.
is it is ugly and it is arrogant and it is very ignorant. And I always think of the thing, you kind of you're a humble guy and you said, intellectually sometimes you don't feel like you're at the level of somebody. But we all know that everyone's a genius in different things. Henry Ford was a mechanic
Yeah.
who became a billionaire, and it is important. And what the real value of it is, it's not just how you look, coming off as arrogant, as ignorant, like that CEO did to me in the airport. I think he would be embarrassed by that if he heard this show now, that he treated somebody that way. Maybe not, because he was a dick fueled CEO.
Right.
um, and I've been it's none of it comes, but I think when you have, and I've been studying a lot of things with vocal tone and being warm and being kind, your tone of voice and what you get out of people, you're going to be limited by if they're going to be arrogant and not listen to you. So when you have a good tone and you let those walls down for people and you're warm and you're willing to listen, you're going to get the most out of people. You're going to learn what makes them tick. You're going to learn about their position, and it's going to help you manage your relationships and manage your work life better if people trust you and feel safe and feel like they can open up to you.
Yes, that is such a good way of putting it. Um, as a skill, calibration is something we don't hear much about, and the way you said that, it kind of makes me feel like um, there are people you meet at work where they don't want to adjust socially, and everybody knows them. There's words for it we use, like they're grumpy, they're a curmudgeon, they are stubborn, they're bullheaded. These are all oftentimes words to describe somebody who does not want to calibrate socially to the environment around them, and they're useful to the job. That's why they're kept around, but they're not going to be given opportunities, and they're not going to be approached for those same opportunities. They're not going to be approached for leadership positions. When we talk about calibration, it falls into the category in psychology of metacognition. Metacognition is the awareness of your own understanding and process and thoughts. Basically, think of it as sort of zooming out on yourself and observing how you think and how you act. And in calibration, if you can sort of watch yourself and watch how you speak to people, and how quickly you adjust to a environment socially, having that zoom out when you're entering a new environment, and seeing how quickly you manage to adjust to that water around you, that's going to help you immensely. Like you're going to be able to do what Todd is talking about. You're going to get those opportunities.
And the more you do it, like, I'll give you an example. A psychologist, a psychiatrist who sits down, a counselor will ask you a lot of questions and listen. And the more information they get, the more they can help you, in theory, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you start social calibrating at work and in your relationships, and you're not a psychologist, you don't have the time. There's more stress, and it's a work time, right?
Right.
It's not as intimate. It's not as individual. But when you start doing this all the time, Joe, you start to see patterns, and you'll start to connect with people deeper and faster than you ever did before. And it really does work. It really is magic, but it does take practice. But it's worth it. I mean, who wouldn't want to enrich all of their relationships? A lot of our relationship is not just the person we live with. It's a lot of our acquaintances and people we know and people we work with, and to get the most out of ourselves and other people. The more practice you put in, the better the results will be.
And it's not going to feel like you are a fake. Like something that came up during the research for this is people talked about, like, why would you do this? It's changing yourself to fit the environment around you. That is fake. For one, it's not. It's kind of human nature. We do it anyway. If you think you didn't adjust to your social environment, then you're fooling
Yeah.
yourself. But also, we super respect people who can do this. Like people who do this consciously, like we mentioned Socrates, but we're also talking like Ben Franklin. We did an episode about Anna Delvey, and she was a criminal, but a very fascinating character who was able to do this kind of stuff. And it's not just code switching. We had that episode was about classism and changing class. This is more about like taking the temperature around you and calibrating quickly. She was a master at it. So we greatly respect and are fascinated by the people that can do this, to the point where if you think, oh, this would make you fake, just look at the real people who are capable of this quickly. And it's like nobody accuses them of being fake. Everybody wants to know how they do it. Like they become an idol or an icon. And speaking of that, um, so you mentioned something when we were just talking about the real John Blackthorn, the guy William Adams. You said something interesting. Um, you said you thought that he was able to accomplish so much in the world of Shogun because he had so much to offer, like so much value, that he showed up on the shores of Japan with just so much information about the Portuguese Empire and the Western world and how they were being blocked, and how the Catholics were blocking other people from trading with Japan. And you thought that it was like, it's not so much his social calibration, it's the value he brought, or was it both?
Yeah, absolutely. Being a pilot, I always laugh at the pilot thing. I think of sailors being sailors now. I think, but he's known as a pilot. At this time, Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church was really big on expanding their territory and getting churches and getting trade routes. So him being a Protestant and being anti that, he was able to expose maybe some of the Catholic Church's other agenda. It wasn't just to convert everyone to Christianity, it was to take over. um, and so he spoke a language that they didn't understand. So his value was, I'm not, and the customs of Western, Eastern could be more different, right? I mean, it's very different. So they had somebody who was willing to share all these secrets, also had contacts all over the world for very, very lucrative trading, and had the will and I think we always kind of make it out to be like everybody in the good old days was an adventurer. Well, they weren't, you know, and a lot of people with money and resources weren't willing to risk their own lives. They just weren't that ambitious, or we say that crazy, right?
Right. Now, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was I was going to say, if you when you sort of see him showing up to these shores, by the time he gets there, already they've converted like half of the nobility to Catholicism. Was it like half or like a couple of them?
It was over 100,000. There was a lot less people, and a lot of the people were people of the higher social class who would have influence on others, right?
Right.
People aren't equal at that time, right? They didn't see soul for soul. Somebody who was a chief or commander or whatever would have more value than, and that's where they started.
Right. Well, if you want to talk masters of calibration, it was the Portuguese, the missionaries. A missionary by nature has to be just like incredibly good at quickly showing up and understanding the culture, and knowing who to talk to and socializing with them. Um,
Well, and I think the William Adams too. Another skill that he would have was being that even though he learned the language, he learned the customs, so he could teach better. He could give value by training and teaching, and not everybody can do that. A lot of doers aren't good at teaching,
yeah.
especially when it's in a whole different world under a different language. So not only was he willing to work, if you go back in his life, like all good biographies, and I went back and studied this William Adams, he had a tough life growing up. His dad died very young, and he was forced as a young man, I think he was around 12 years old, to become the head of the household. And so he started working in the shipyards. He got good at navigation. He became an apprentice at a younger age than most. So he was a lifelong learner, and somebody who's willing to work hard their whole life and keep proving their skills um, is somebody that these Japanese leaders recognized as being, okay, this is somebody we can't let go because there's so few of them in the world.
Right. Even cross culture, you recognize when somebody is that sharp and quick at calibrating. Like it is magnetic. I think.
And there'll be confidence that shows from it. You know, anytime you get really good at something, there's that confidence that you can see.
Yeah. I had a thought, and I want to run it past you. Do you think that he was able, like he was, not to spoil too much, but he got promoted several times into Japanese society, and he was able to sort of like become an advisor slash, you know, he's able to speak to the ear of the shogun, and the shogun was the grand warlord of Japan. Like Toranaga in the show is based on is the shogun Ieyasu. Now, do you think that Blackthorn was able to basically become an advisor to the most powerful man in Japan because he was willing to become socially Japanese? He was able to speak to them on their level, observe their culture and customs. He was able to submerge themselves, and to the point where the Portuguese didn't seem to do that. The Portuguese showed up; they always dressed in their own robes. They always went around with each other. Like they traveled Japan, but they did it in groups as missionaries.
You're right.
They
They were trying to
demanded,
change them. They were trying to make them more like back home in Portugal, right?
they wanted to make Japanese into uh, Portuguese Christians. Basically, they want to convert them, and they demanded respect because their position was the position of traitors and men under God. Versus
And
here's
socially
Adams,
superior, right? And superior, um, uh, religiously superior, right? Spiritually superior.
right? Whereas Adams shows up and he's like, I will learn your culture and I will speak on your level and I will calibrate to you, and on top of that, I have invaluable knowledge.
I think you said that you nailed that. I think that his willingness to learn that is such a sign of respect. And then the push pull, I think it's easier to say, well, back where we're from, we're more advanced, we're better at this, so you need to be more like us. And he didn't do that. He I think he genuinely saw the value in both cultures and tried to use both.
Right.
But in order to do that, he had to you know, it's funny. I have personal experience in this, and this wasn't that long. When I met my ex-wife, she was Korean, and my father-in-law didn't speak any English, and I was very stubborn about bowing. I just felt that it was silly, and I was kind of embarrassed to do it. Now, as an older person, I'm embarrassed about how I acted about it. That I didn't realize that why couldn't I just do that for him? I thought it was somehow taking away from me being my own person, you know, and
Right.
but now I don't see it like that. I see it as he would have liked me more and we would have had a better relationship if I would have done that. And then I realized now I've studied this and there's different ways to bow to different people. You don't bow the same to the president of the country as you do to someone who serves you food. You
That
half bow and you head bow, and and if you over bow to people who is seen in that culture as not deserving it embarrasses the people who are around you. And then walking with women or having women walk behind you, there's a lot to it. It takes some practice.
I honestly think that what you said there, knowing how to bow or who to bow to, that could be the metaphor for this whole thing. Is a lot of times calibration is knowing what is the position of the people around you, and who do you give deference to and how much.
No,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
we're talking about something that happened 500 years ago, right? Is that about right? 400 years ago.
Oh God, hold on. It took place 1600. Yeah.
But this is very usable in today's. Okay, everybody knows. Everyone listening to the show will know somebody at work who has hitched their wagon to somebody in upper management just fell in love with this person. And this person's life, business career has taken off because of it. And it never makes sense. It's never the hardest working, it's never the most talented, it's never the most educated. But they saw some value in this person. And I think it's that person's level of calibration with everybody.
Yeah. I I agree with that, and I think that we always talk about like we're taking lessons from history and we're combining them with good science, and that's how we get the re-engineered you. Honestly, this is the biggest lesson from history we might have taken, is figuring out how people can calibrate well. And um, there's something I was thinking about that you just said, which is, um, you said that you would feel silly, like it wasn't, genuine for you to bow to somebody else, especially because you don't bow in your culture, or you hadn't. I think there's a sweet spot for calibration. I think it's when you're young, you do it instinctively, like very young, like when you are a toddler to maybe, young teen. It is instinct for you to calibrate. And then once you become a teen, you become more rebellious and you start sort of like defining your own personality. And then through your early middle years, like being an adult, you are, you're showing some respect to people that you think deserve it, but you're trying to be more authentically you, and you're not willing as much to sacrifice that. And then by the time you become mature and an older person, hopefully, suddenly you're calibrating because you're choosing to. You're deciding which social groups are valuable for you to join. You're deciding, do I want to be part of book club or church? Do I want to become, part of this public speaking group? Do I want to become part of this leadership group at work? You're suddenly having to choose which cultures you want to integrate into, and your prior ability to do it will determine your future success. So, like, did
That's
you learn
true.
this
Yeah.
younger, or did you not bow to anybody and then later wish you had learned? Um, and for this, I kind of have three sort of handy considerations, or tools to help us calibrate. Um, and these are really kind of, I mean, like, we don't get more no duh than this because it is such an instinctive human thing. But the goal of this isn't to tell anyone something new. The goal of this is to remind people of the skills they already have so that they can do it consciously. That is the big part. And then that is actually step number one. And we're going to leave links to all this. There's a great psychology lexicon article about calibration that we're going to link off to. It's going to basically tell you all this information. But the first part is awareness, recognizing the need for calibration and acknowledging your potential biases. Meaning, do you come from a culture like the Portuguese Catholics who are like, we deserve respect because we have God's ear and we have a mandate from God, and we split the world in half literally through an edict, and we are missionaries, we come to claim, or do you see a need for you to calibrate when you arrive somewhere and you're like, I want to be socially part of this group quickly, and I want people to give me opportunities. So, how do I do that? Who do I speak with and blend in with? um, Make acknowledging that an active skill. That is the first step. Is when you enter a new group, don't pretend it's part of you or your group. Like if I go to a dinner party with Todd, I'm not going to pretend that I'm already part of their social group. I'm not. I don't know anything about anything they're talking about. I'm not from their corporate culture. I don't know the people there, and I don't know the subjects they're going to speak on. So my awareness, like my antenna clicks, it like a Geiger counter starts clicking, lets me know that I need to calibrate. um, Even if I'm in a group where I'm trying to find those commonalities, like Todd was talking about. If I go to a party, I start picking on people who are into the same fiction as me, or into the same sports as me. I still should tell myself, hey, this is me trying to calibrate. I will have biases coming here. I will think people who are into sports are dumb, which is untrue. But I may think that, these people are into a religion I'm not into. I'm going to perceive them as being cult like, which isn't true. Like, or vice versa. Maybe it is true. But you have to recognize
That
when
is a
you're out of
scary
your
one.
element.
That
Yeah.
too religious one, right?
Right.
Too political, too religious, too sportsy, too anything is kind of scary, right?
Right. So instead of just feeling what normally you feel, which is like, I'm out of my elements, this is gross, I don't want to be around these people, like, or this is strange, I don't know how to communicate to them. And instead of feeling intimidated and having those bad feelings, instead just tell yourself, this is a different environment, it's a different social group. My antenna is twitching. This lets me know I need to actively calibrate. I need to
And this is a
consider
good
this.
opportunity for practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Um, And then that's the next part. The next part is objective feedback. Once your antenna starts twitching, you're at a new job. You're trying to calibrate. You want to click quickly and to become part of the culture quickly. That's when you start taking feedback. And people are very subtle and subconscious about the feedback they give you. Usually, people will just tell you with their face. If you say something that's out of the culture, or if you act in a way that is weird for their norms, they'll kind of give you a sidelong glance. They'll give you the side eye. They may take you aside and say that was weird, or they'll give you subtle, uncomfortable hints. Usually, if you start getting those, you got to start talking to people. That is when you take this into the feedback realm. We've mentioned the doctor who wrote the book on self awareness, Tasha Urich. She talks about doing a couple of activities like a dinner of truth, where you find a mentor in the group or somebody you trust in the new group that you're trying to join. You take them to dinner, and you say, "Hey, I need you to tell me about me. What am I doing wrong? Can you give me constructive feedback that is actionable that I can sort of take pointers on?" Or you find a social mirror. You find somebody who is willing to do that regularly. You're in a new culture. You're in a new job. You're in a new city. Whatever. Find somebody who looks like they know what they're doing and looks like they are smart enough to give you feedback, and then meet with them once a week for 30 minutes.
Shadow, right? Shadow them.
Right.
Yeah, they
Well,
could. They
that's
know that. Yeah,
that
you will pick up things from people who are better at this, and you'll say, especially if you're paying attention.
that is honestly, I think that's the classic way to do it. Is apprenticeship works for a reason. It's because if it's not just the job, it's because the culture. You shadow somebody and you apprentice them for a year or something, or 6 months or whatever, and it tunes your antenna for you. But you can do it yourself, and you can do it quicker.
Well, going back to that, people who've known somebody who's been promoted readily, and the big thing, the big dismissal is what? Oh, they're a kiss ass, they're a brown noser. You know what I mean? But then if you were to genuinely spend time with that person and evaluate what they're good at socially, it's usually a social thing. It's always a social thing. So if
Right.
you could really get off of that and say, okay, well, what are they good at? Well, where are they connecting these dots that most of the world and everyone else in the company has not?
Yeah. And calling somebody a brown nose or a kiss ass, that brings us to mindfulness, weirdly enough, because to reduce your own biases, you have to overcome the instinct to judge. So, like in the show Shogun, Blackthorn shows up and he's like, "These people bathe every day. That's very effeminate. It also like exposes you to what they thought was the flux or like different diseases." At that point, some European sailors were like, "If you take a bath too often, it makes you a perfumed dandy, and also you're more likely to get sick because it feels cold on your skin." They ate weird food. They spoke in weird ways. They seemed brutal to him. So like all of those negative biases, he just sort of like shoved them aside and mindfully worked through them one at a time. If you read the book, it actually shows him doing the mental math on like, this is why they do this thing. This is why they bow in this way. This is why they bathe every day. This is why they do this cultural thing that is different to me every day. And you have to do that yourself. The mindfulness part of this, that mindfulness is number three. You have to, every time you see something you think is odd or bad or negative or you have a strange feeling about, you actually have to tell yourself why they're doing it. You got to figure it out. And doing that math kind of sucks, takes up time, and you may have to ask some people and have very awkward conversations. But getting through that is part of calibration, and it makes things click vastly more effectively.
Well, one of my favorite parts of Shogun, and there's a lot. It's a must watch, and you'll binge watch it. But there's these beautiful Japanese women and this stinky sailor from England. They're offering to bathe him, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And they're kind of looking at each other like, why does this stinky sailor not? And you're watching, you're like, why not? You stink, and the beautiful women are going to bathe you. It sounds like a win-win here, but again, he's holding on to his own.
Right.
culture as much as he can. Maybe a little too hard, right?
They're holding his nose, and he's like, "I already bathed." I think they made him bathe like the first day, and then he's like, "I bathed last week. I'm good." um, so my next question for this is, speaking of calibration being a more mature tool in the toolbox, why now? Like, for you, Todd, I know the answer for me, and I'll share that. But why is this a focus for you later in life versus earlier?
I realize the value of deeper relationships and connecting with people. When you get good at calibration, I'm a lot better than I used to be. And you'll say something and you'll see a look on someone's face, and it almost looks like they're shocked, like they're electrocuted. And then it goes to they'll become pleased and they'll be relaxed. And when you start noticing this, you know that you made a connection with that person. And then this person will look forward to seeing you. Person will look forward to having a deeper relationship with you. And it is not a magic trick. It's not manipulation, because to get good at this, the very first thing you're going to have to do is become genuinely interested in other people and try to kind of figure out what lock it is and figure out what your life experiences and your education and your personality, how you two will fit together best. And that has real
Right.
power.
I think that is a really how people fit together. That seems like a mature human kind of concern. Like when I was young, I didn't give a damn how I fit together with the people around me at job or at home, honestly. But like as you get older, you realize that all the good things in life come from that.
Mhm.
Fitting together with the people around you in your social group, all of the best benefits. Before the podcast started, we were talking about how um, the older you get, the better you get at saying to people, "I don't know what you're talking about or how to do that. I need you to teach me," and just doing it in like more respectful, mature ways that don't make you seem like a dummy. Like that is the really the humility of becoming mature as a person, and a
Yeah.
lot of that comes down to calibration.
And a lot of it too is in your own family, which is probably the hardest place because we all have entitlement. But with children and even with grown adults, how you get along with your siblings and your parents and what you bring to the family and what people take away and how you work as a group. If you can get good at this, you can really, really have a better quality of life.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Um, I I was thinking about people who seem to be able to calibrate automatically to the point where we expect it. If you've ever read, uh, was it Aldo Huxley's Strange New World? No, Brave New World. He talks about like people get automatically sorted based on their intelligence, social abilities, and like even to the point where like how much chemicals they were like that were introduced to them when they were like in utero. So like they stratify their classes automatically and they sort them automatically, and that's an extreme case and it is a fiction case. But like I sometimes wonder about this with social calibration. I wonder if we expect we sort people into being lawyers and businessmen and give them better academic standing and give them more opportunities because they show high calibration early. And if you just won't calibrate, you become a plumber. Like you are sorted into doing labor because you can't go up to a new group of people and calibrate fast.
If you're not willing to ask for new opportunities. You're absolutely right. I want to talk to you about something personally. You moved in with a family who was very close knit, and you came from a family that had some dysfunctional, some addiction issues. How scared were you of calibrating into that family? Because the woman that you became engaged with or are planning on marrying, um, she has a deep. I mean, there's deep roots of family there. Was that something that was caused you some anxiety, some anxiousness, or
Oh, absolutely. And it was both. It was
because you had a geographical move to be closer to her family, and then you had to figure out how to where you fit in without trying to be a bullet, right?
I was trying to write a calibration episode without mentioning myself and moving to the South, but yeah, Leo Tolstoy in Anna Karenina said, "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." That's what calibration is when you boil it down. When it comes to families, is if you come from a dysfunctional family, it is dysfunctional in its own unique way, and you show up with a lot of baggage, and not just baggage. By baggage, I mean bias in calibration. You show up and you kind of have like a notion of how things are going to work with a family because you're from a family. If that family is dysfunctional, you will have notions like you don't apologize when you're having a fight with somebody because you think it shows vulnerability. It shows that you were wrong or that your feelings weren't valid. When in reality, healthy people apologize. You show up thinking, if somebody asks you a lot of questions, it means they're probing for weaknesses. Or if somebody wants to borrow money, it means that they have done something stupid, usually involving addiction, and they're not going to pay you back that money. So like if you come from a dysfunctional family, you have to calibrate, and you have to be very transparent about it. Like what I've learned both from therapy and from doing it myself is when you show up with biases and you want to calibrate, you have to start by saying out loud to the people you're calibrating with, hey, I'm, you make a joke of it if you need to, but in my family, this would have been, seen as a weakness, or please accept this as a compliment. I'm trying to learn how to compliment people. Like you can say things that are soft, but that also let people know that you are working on it, and that
I,
you
I like the
need.
humility in that too, is that you don't know how to do this, but you're trying. And that's going to encourage. And I have that same problem as a salesperson. I have a lot of engineer friends now, which I didn't have before. And when someone starts asking them questions, they feel like they're being manipulated. And what I try to tell them is, as salespeople, we're trying to find common ground so hard so we can get closer to you and get to know you. But sometimes it can come off as a as an interrogation, you know.
Right, when you're desperately trying to be like, "What kind of dog do you have? Do you have kids? What about your wife?" And it's like, yeah, you do feel manipulated, but it is just like you're trying
uh,
to find links and connections.
and I think at our core, we're flattered when anyone shows interest in us. So the only way to really do this wrong is to not try and not put yourself out there.
I That is such a good statement. We're not going to end the episode here because we have a lot more to go. But like that is the core of this is if you show people you are trying to calibrate, if you show people that you are trying to learn their culture, if you're trying to learn how to communicate with them, they appreciate it, and it's almost heroic. Like because most people do it instinctually, if at all. It is seen as admirable, 100%, and it can be funny at times. You can make a joke of it, but putting in the work, um, putting in work in calibration is kind of like putting in work in breathing. Everybody thinks they know how to do it. Everybody does it, so they don't think they need to put work in. When people see you putting your nose to the grindstone with it, they respect it all the more. It is seen as a very positive thing. And then you find common ground, and then you make those bridges and you make those links, and it works spectacularly. You are almost seen as more what do you call it? You're given more opportunities than otherwise because you did put in that effort. That's what happens in Shogun. I think like when it's almost rewarding to the audience to read and to watch when the character makes those breakthroughs in the culture, like starts clicking, starts getting it. Like when somebody quote unquote gets it, they calibrate well. It feels it's so impressive to see. It feels rewarding. So another question: when you and I met, we did not speak. We both spoke English. we're both native English speakers, but we honestly did not communicate on each other's levels very much. Like not at first. It took
We
a
were at a
while.
club. I think it's safe to say we were in a club of 15 people, and it was a pretty dynamic group, a very diverse group of people People who do things after work are different kind of people. And we met at this club. Joe and I didn't say two words to each other for 2 years, which is shocking given how much time. Thank God we calibrated with each other, and it took some time.
Right. But
Yeah, we
it
had said
it
two
took.
words to each other.
I think it took when you say in sales that you are trying to like find a common language to speak to each other. That's honestly what it was. I believe that is your values didn't match mine. We had different languages of like what we wanted and what we respected, and
But this is what happened. I the reason I connected with you, we are very different kind of people with different personalities. You're an introvert, I'm an extrovert with different lives. But I heard you speak, and I will listen to your speeches. I listened to your feedback and you you had a deeper understanding that you were at a different skill level than the rest of the club. And I said I need to connect with this guy, and I asked you to be my mentor. And it was a life-changing thing, and it wasn't an easy thing to do, especially given that we'd had history that I hadn't shown any. But it took me a while to see the value in you. I'd heard you do a lot of speeches, and then finally it just connected, because I think sometimes we think we have to learn from people who are a lot like us.
yeah, or that they're
And
on the same track, that they're going in a direction we want to go.
yeah, isn't that weird though? And then a lot of times, if we already have these strengths, we have to kind of, I don't know. But it took me a long time. And then finally I saw, oh shit, and then you worked with me, and then my speeches got 100% better immediately. And my life, as far as my public speaking career, got better, so much better. My communication with other people got better once I connected. We started doing this show. I met my wife. A lot of good things happened. And it all started with that, with calibration and learning some new skills and getting better, getting exposure because once my speeches got better, I felt more confident going out and competing in contests, and I was more visible. I joined more clubs. I got a following, and all from being able to calibrate and find somebody who could help me get better at my skill.
I remember after doing episodes on the show about like submarines, and then you talked to me about like you met somebody who was in the military and you're able to speak to them on their level about like recruitment and officer promotion and processes, and like you were like you were you were at a cocktail party calibrating to people faster than they are used to, and it made me very happy to hear that. And I wondered too why it took us so long to put this episode together, because we're hundreds of episodes in, and we're like, let's do an episode on breathing. Like it really feels like we're doing it like one of the most fundamental episodes so late.
Yeah, it
Um,
is. It's an involuntary thing, but it's brought us so much. And when you study things, and we've made with this show, this has helped us because we talk about different topics, and we can actually now, because we do work on this for hours a week, we can recognize these things.
yeah.
We can speak on those. So
Well, that kind of brings me to why wouldn't you do this all the time? Like the dangers of calibration. Why wouldn't you?
does popularity have a price?
Yeah. Or does having your antenna turned on nonstop, does that have a price? Does it make you over aware or too self conscious? I think that's the biggest danger for me. We'll start with that one. I think that people who are too aware of social calibration, they become Jerry Seinfeld or Woody Allen. They become hyper aware of the social fabric around them. They become hyper aware of the expectations that people have when you come sit in the room with them. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. There are all these like little social rules, and there are all these little sort of norms that exist in different cultures. And if you pay too much attention to them, and you don't turn off your antenna, I think it makes you anxious. I think it makes you uh, um, it makes you overcorrect. And I have an example. I worked at it was a Comcast office where lots of cubicles, like 100 people were forced to talk with each other every day in a very sort of like not close knit, but everybody had their cliques and cultures. But it was all open because cubicles are literally open. So like they all had to be aware of each other's like subcultures that they were building. There was the group of cubicles where everybody liked to talk about the show Euphoria, and there's a group of cubicles where everybody was sort of older, and they had literally got their cubicles rearranged or moved so that like the more mature people could like be roughly around each other. And I watched a new person show up, and they tried to calibrate and adjust to every group there, and they were seen as like a group hopper, like they were seen as sort of like an interloper that was just like their entertainment was calibrating, their entertainment was participating in every group. And so you either go one way or the other. If you do this too much, you either get super nervous and you become Woody Allen and you're just anxious all the time because you have this in the back of your mind and it won't shut off, or you become somebody who is entertained by it and you become sort of like intrusive about it. I think I'm more in danger of being the anxious person rather than the intrusive person. How do you feel about that? Have you ever overcorrected one way or the other?
I have it. I don't know if it's that easy to do because you just don't have the energy. You know what I mean?
It does take a lot of energy. Yeah.
Yeah, it does, and I think you kind of have to. I think it's a process. I think you don't go that deep right away. I think once your people start seeing you having genuine interest, it'll build kind of organically and naturally. So it doesn't have to be forced. It'll feel forced at first. It's kind of like you're planting a lot of seeds, and then you're going to start to see people are just going to start to communicate with you better. So I think it'll calibrate the energy itself.
Right. I there's another danger to calibration too, and it's not just your energy level and uh, um, whether you have the motivation to. It's also whether you have the bias for it. Like if you calibrate to a new group and that new group has beliefs or pre-existing things, like if I go and work at a group, a law firm, and I start low at the totem pole and I'm with the secretaries and paralegals and they all hate their bosses, I may go up the ladder with the bias of lawyers are shit. Like lawyers are awful people who just abuse the people under them to like do legwork, and they're all prima donnas who drive Bentleys and stuff like that. You can adopt new negative biases when you join a group because it makes you integrate with the group faster. Gossip and negative biases actually do make you integrate. Like people see you as one of them if you have the same negative thoughts about somebody else. If I join a Democratic group or Republican group, they're going to give me the thumbs up and accept me faster if I hate the other group of people who opposes them. So like it's too easy to come in with your own confirmation bias. It's too easy to play into confirmation bias once you're at a group, and it can change your social networking too, or your structure. Like if you show up and you start bad mouthing the opposite group, I badmouth lawyers, I badmouth Republicans or Democrats. Not only does it make me get adopted into the group faster, it also makes me think more like that. It doesn't matter if I'm lying. It's you can eventually convince yourself by participating in a group that their beliefs are correct. If you hear it enough and you're surrounded by it enough, you just naturally will kind of code switch to it eventually. Um, and then, like we said, the other one they list on this article is emotional impact. You calibrate, think about too much, obsess about it too much. Calibration, how much you're being accepted, who doesn't like you, why don't they like you yet? Are you wearing the right clothes? Did you buy the right handbag? Whatever. It becomes anxious. It makes you anxious. It leads to distress and sometimes depression. And if you hear too many sort of uncomfortable truths about yourself too quick, when you're doing sort of these dinners of truth or these, you get a mentor who's actually giving you good feedback, but it's too much, it can cause you anxiety. So there are issues with calibrating too much too fast. Um, but if you can sort of learn to tread that water, and if you can learn to regulate that, the benefits far, far, far outweigh the negatives, I think. Um, if we could sort of put a cherry on top for how this relates to Shogun and the real life version of atoms, the real life version of John Blackthorn, who is Adams. Um, there's a moment in the show, and I don't think you've gotten there yet. The soon to be Shogun hints that he's never going to let Adams or Blackthorn leave. He basically says this European pilot slash navigator is too useful, too smart, has too much good information. I'm keeping him in Japan. And now for anybody who's listening to this podcast, we are going to spoil the next 2 seasons of Shogun because this is actually what happened to Adams.
Yeah, he does. And when you're too valuable, people aren't going to let you go. But on the flip side of that, he got to do exactly what he was great at doing. He got to set up trade routes and make wealth. He had a family in England. He had a family in Japan. He had property. He had a salary. He had 80 servants. Now, I don't know what 80 servants do. I mean, I could think 2 housekeepers, a chef, a driver, who would drive your carriage or whatever. He had 80. So he had wealth. And when he passed, he was able to take care of both of his families. So I don't think you can get any more successful than that. He was rich in love and he was rich in stuff.
That is awesome. Like I don't know why it makes me happy that the guy that showed up to Japan and like decided he was going to respect everybody or respect as many people as possible and become part of the culture instead of indoctrinate people. I don't know why that pleases me that he got crazy success and yeah.
The 80 cents, that's a lot of servants.